Good morning. Welcome to the Church360 Ledger Reports and Reconciliation webinar. My name is Jordan Bogart. I am a software support technician here with Concordia Technology Solutions Software Support. I have been here for almost 11 years here now. So I've been here around for a long time. I'm very familiar with Church360. I've supported it for years and years, and it is a pleasure to be able to serve our churches across the nation. So I'm really blessed with that opportunity. If you'd like to reach out to me, if you have any questions, you can do so. There's my email address and phone number. Either one you can get a hold of me on. I do want to note that all phones and microphones have been muted for today's session. So if you have any questions, you just say I'm not going to hear those. But if you have any questions, we do have our questions window. Ask any questions you want there. I'll either get those answered, or joining me today is my manager, Rod Kiles, and he's going to be answering questions for you as well here in that questions window. Rod has been here coming up on 25 years here, I believe, this year. So he's been here for over twice the time I have, so he is doubly knowledgeable about Church360. So if you want to get a hold of him, you can see his contact information there. All right, so let's go ahead and get into what we are going to be discussing today. Just kind of a quick breakdown of the structure of this session. We're going to be, of course, just going over our agenda here. So we're going to get into our discussion about reports and the bank account reconciliation process. There will be a quiz near the end. Do not stress about that. You are not being graded. This is just merely to see if, hey, did you retain kind of some of the things I talked about here today. And then at the very end, there is a Q&A session. But again, you don't feel like you have to hold your questions till the end. If you have a question as I'm talking about something, just put it in the questions window, and either I will answer it or Rod will answer it, and we'll be happy to help you do that. So as for the actual content of today's class, well, we're going to be talking about reports, of course. We're going to be talking about a few different views and special reports, so things that go into that. We're going to be talking about some the kind of pre-built financial reports, some of the pre-built financial reports we have. And then we're going to get into how you can use some of the custom report tools in the system to build your own custom reports. We'll also be talking about the bank account reconciliation process, and we'll take a look at our event log here also. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera here now, and let's go ahead and focus in on what we have here for today's training. So starting things out, views and special reports. The first one I want to talk about is the general ledger. So let's go ahead and jump over to Church360. And here in Church360, I want to talk about the general ledger view here first. So if I click on where it says general ledger up here at the top, this brings me into my general ledger view. And what I'm going to be using this view for is this is how I can find transactions and work with transactions. So if I am trying to find a particular transaction, the main way you're going to do that is by setting the date range that you'd like to look at. So maybe I need to look at the transactions back from January of this year. I could go ahead and set the month up here, and then the year over here, and then I would go ahead and I put in the beginning of the date range that I want to look at and the end of the date range. If you want to look at just a single day, just click on the day twice. You'll see it'll turn into a circle like this. That indicates we're looking at just that one day, but let's go ahead and look at the entire month. If I click confirm, then you can see it changes the date range of transactions that I'm looking at. It's going to show you the latest transactions first, and as you scroll down, you'll see the older transactions then. Now, we also on the calendar here had some pre-built options for you. These are some common date ranges that people like to look at. So transactions from just the current week, transactions from the previous week, the current month, last quarter, our year to date, this year, so all of the entire year, last year. So we have a few kind of shortcut options to help you quickly select, common date ranges that you might be looking at. Now the general ledger here, it can also be filtered. So if I wanted to find, let's say, all the payees to all the transactions to other expense, if I start typing that in, you'll see it'll start loading. Hold on here. Let's maybe try this another way. Well, let's do it this way. Let's go ahead and let's look for, if I type in 300 here, well, hey, here's transactions that total of $300, or I search, let's do, I don't know, I try check. Well, okay, then it should be filtering to check. So you have a couple different ways to filter your transactions here in the system. Another thing you can do is you can show and hide voided transactions. So if I do, let me go back here to this month because I know I have some voided transactions here in the current month, and I do show voided. Well, what show voided does for us here is this is going to show any voided transactions we have during this time period. So, going back into this here, if right now I'm just seeing all my unvoided transactions. If I click show voided, if I have any voided transactions during this time period, and I thought I had a voided transaction here, maybe I don't. That's okay. Let me go ahead and just void one really quick. So let's go ahead and void this $1,000 deposit here. I'm going to void that real quickly. And then if I do show voided, you can see now any voided transactions will appear, but they'll have a line through them here kind of indicating that they've been voided here at this point. So we have that there. So, and again, so by default, you won't see your voided transactions, but if you click this show voided, those transactions would then show up. You can also print this view out. If you click the print button, this is going to give you a printable version of your general ledger. So you'll be able to see that there. You could export this out to Excel, and this would give you an Excel spreadsheet version of the ledger. So you'll be able to see it in that format also. And it's going to break it out into credits and debits on these different transactions. And we even have an option to import, but that's if you're bringing your data in from another source. You can actually import transactions in. So that's something that we do when you're first getting into the software. If you're coming from something that's not Shepherd Staff or the old version of Church360 Ledger, that's something you'd be able to do through kind of a conversion process. So that's the import process. Import button is for. So you see all your transactions here on the general ledger. If you ever want to see the detail of a transaction here on the general ledger, just hover over the transaction that you want to know more about, click on it, and then you can see it expands the transaction so you can see all the line items used on that transaction. If you need to make changes to that transaction, you can click the edit button, provided it has not been reconciled and provided that it is not in a locked fiscal year. And if you want to view more details about a transaction, click this button here to view the transaction register, and you would be able to see that saved transaction then. So you can see all the details about that transaction. So lots of information going on there. So the general ledger, extremely useful view, extremely useful tool. And again, you can print that out, you can export it to get different pieces of information out of it. Okay. Moving along next view we're going to talk about is the chart of accounts. So back over to Ledger here. Let me pull that up. Where'd it go on me? There it is. We're going to go to chart of accounts. So here in our chart of accounts, this is a screen we looked at quite extensively on our first training session, but just a few additional things I want to show you. You can search for particular accounts just by typing in their name in this filter by box. So if I start typing in, for example, tax, okay, well it finds all the accounts that have the term tax being used in them. So you can search for different accounts this way. And if you have a lengthier chart of accounts, this can be a good way to find the account that you want to work with. Okay. Let me go back here. So you can archive accounts, and again, we talked a little bit about that on Monday, but if you ever archive account and you decide, hey, I want to see that account again, if I click Show Archived, any of your archived accounts, so like this inactive asset account, would become visible again for you, so you could go ahead and take a closer look at that. I'm going to go ahead and hide that then though. Okay. You can print your chart of accounts out. If you click print, this would go ahead and take your chart of accounts view and allow you to print that out. Pretty simple there. Of course, this could also be exported to an Excel spreadsheet, and you'd be able to see, again, more detail about your chart of accounts here. This export doesn't have any balances on it, but this is more for the purpose of just seeing kind of account structure here. That's how that would work. Okay. And if you want to know more detail about an account, similar to what we had in the general ledger view, you can click on this arrow to the right on any account, and this is going to let you view, again, the register for this particular account. So when we look at this, let's go ahead and, actually I'm going to grab the wrong, I'm intended to get the checking account here. Let's do that. If I go into my checking account here, again, I'm going to see the detail about this account. And it's going to tell me a few things. It's going to tell me, that, of course, the name of the account, the current balance, the scheduled amount here is basically what's going to be happening in this account here in the future, if you have any transactions entered into the future, the current balance of the account, and then you can see here's a transaction register, but just for this one particular account. It also gives you a summary of its settings, so account number, account type, can you write checks from this, can you write payments from this, you'd see that there. We also have what's called the Ancestry tab. The Ancestry tab is going to show you, again, kind of the, again, going back to account structure for this account. So you can see, here's the account we have right here, Central Trust Checking. It is a child account of this parent account called Checking. If I click on Checking, we can see then, well, Checking is a child account of Central Trust, and it has the children of Central Trust Checking and Inactive Asset Account. And you can just keep going up the line. So this helps you, again, kind of look at your account structure here. If we go to charts, this is going to give you just a quick visualization of basically over the last couple months, how has the value of this account changed over time. And then the last option here is the reconciliation screen. This is where we're going to go to do our bank account reconciliation. So we'll be back here later to take a closer look at the bank account reconciliation. Okay, so that is our chart of accounts view. Let's go ahead next and let's take a look at our budgets view. So what do we have going on in the budgets view? Well, again, we already kind of took a look at the budgets view during our first training session, but I do want to just briefly mention it here. This is our budgets view. This is going to show us what our budgets are for income, expense, and then any funds that you have set up to be budgeted here. You can see the budget values for these accounts. And you can change which fiscal year you're working with. I'm looking at our current fiscal year here at the moment. If I click the change option, I can select any of my past fiscal years or an upcoming fiscal year, or the next upcoming fiscal year. And that's so you can plan your budgets in advance by selecting the next one. If you'd like, you could print this out. So if you want a budget printout to provide like your church council, you could click print to provide them with that. And there's an export button here as well that would let you export this. And you have the option of exporting all your accounts or just the accounts that can be budgeted here as well. And when you say all the accounts, I mean all your income, expense, and funds, or just the budgetable income, expense, and funds. So if I were to export, let's say, all these, this is going to give us a CSV file here that has all the accounts, account numbers, and then the total, and then each of the months. Now this is actually something you could export, and then if you wanted to, after you've made your changes to it, you'd have the option to import this same file back in to bring your budgets into Church360 Ledger if you're just more comfortable working in Excel than you are inside a ledger. Either way is fine. Okay, so not much to say about the budget screen, but again, this is a good place you can get just kind of a all months budget report. Next thing I want to talk about here is a pay stub report. So maybe you pay your employees via direct deposit, but an employee comes to you and says, "Hey, I really need to have a pay stub," and there's a couple of different reasons you might need a pay stub. Then from your employer. So we can provide them with that. How we'll do that is, again, we'll go into Ledger, Let's go back to our general ledger and let's find the payroll transaction they need a pay stub for. So let's say Teresa came to us and says, well, I need a pay stub for my last paycheck. No problem. Let's go ahead and find her paycheck. Well, actually, getting a little bit ahead of myself there. That's okay. I have some transactions entered into the future here. We'll just grab this future one. She needs a pay stub for future paycheck. That's fine. But if I click on this account here and click the arrow, actually not the account, but the transaction and the arrow to the right, if I go up here to the top, you'll see on the payroll transactions, there's a button here that says print pay stub. If I click print pay stub, this is going to give you a preview of what is going to appear when you do your pay stub here. So what you're going to see, a couple different things. You're going to see first off the earnings, and it shows, and this is saying, okay, well, basically the expense account that was used to pay this employee, so this staff salary, $1,500 in the current paycheck, year to date was $16,500. And then it's going to show you all the deductions. And we break this out into, it kind of shows all the different employer deductions. So state income tax, not employer, employee deductions. So state income tax, federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare. And you see here's what was taken out of the current payroll transaction, and here's what that's been year to date. Finally, at the bottom, you get your payroll summary. So you see, again, for your current pay and then your year-to-date pay. You see that all here. If you click the print button, this is going to give you a printable version of that pay stub that you could then provide to an employee if they would need that. So that is how we can generate a pay stub. Moving along next, the next type of report we want to look at is our pay summary report. Now, for some of your employees, maybe you may need to generate a 1099, or well, not employee, but you may need to generate a 1099 for an employee. And this is going to help you do that. It's not necessarily a 1099 itself, but it's going to give you the information you would need to fill out a 1099 for them. So if I go back over to Ledger, and I'm going to click on the gear icon, and then we're going to go ahead and go into our payees. So if we go to our payees, it's going to show us a listing of all our different payees. One thing to note is that with any payees that the system views as, hey, they might need a 1099, and this is because they've exceeded, I believe it's a threshold of $600 of being paid within the year, it's going to put this 1099 form needed for payee icon next to them. Now, again, you may or may not need that. That's up to your own discretion. This is just our system's way of flagging it and saying, hey, you might want to run one for this particular employee. But once we have that, if I want to see a payee summary for this person, I would click on the little arrow to the right here. And then if I click summary report, it's going to ask me what year do I need a pay summary report for. So let's say I need this for the previous year, calendar 2024. I click on this, and this provides us with a pay summary for this particular person during the year of 2024. And I would be able to click print to print that out. This is what the printout would look like. You'd also be able to export this out to Excel, and here's what that would look like out in Excel here. And we'll say, yes, that's fine. And you can see that there, and that would be how that would work. Okay, so that is the payee summary. Now, we are going to talk about the reconciliation report, but I'm going to go ahead and save that until we get more towards the end of today's training after we've actually done a reconciliation. So we will come back to that. All right, next thing I want to talk about are some of the pre-built reports we have here in the system in our financial reports section. So the first one up I'm going to talk about here today is our balance sheet. So to get to our balance sheet, I'm going to click on the $ here, and then we're going to go to financial reports. Now this is going to bring us to our financial reports screen. So I guess I should back up just one step. Before I talk about specific reports, let's talk about our financial reports screen. So this is the screen where you are going to see all the different pre-built reports we have in the system, but also any custom report you create. We'll get into how you can kind of make some custom reports here as well. So you'll see your list of reports here. It'll show you who created these reports. So if it's created by your system default reports, they'll just say Church360. Otherwise, they'll have the name of the person who created that report there. So you'll see who the report is for. And we have a few options here on the actions on the right. You'll notice a star next to each one of these reports. We can mark any reports that we use frequently as a favorite report by clicking on this star. So let's say I do the statement of income and expense. I do this one all the time. So if I click the star on it here, that's going to go ahead and mark it as a favorite report. You see it gets a little star on the left next to it. And when I refresh my page, even though the system puts these in alphabetical order, any starred reports will instead be at the very top of your list. So that way they're right there at the top, easy to find for you. If you decide later, well, I don't really need this to be on my list of favorites anymore, I just click on this again, and it's going to remove it from my list of favorites. And when I refresh the page, it's going to go ahead and take this report and put it back where it was before. There is a delete button here. This would delete a report, so it just gets rid of it entirely. Now you'll notice for some of these here, you can actually delete these. Don't worry, any of these reports could be recreated using the custom report builder that we have here in the system. So if any of these got deleted, no need to panic. We can help you get it back. There is the edit report option, and that would let you go ahead and make changes to an already existing report. So you could go in and kind of change around columns. You could add in additional columns. You could add on sections to the report. You can do basically whatever you want to the report from there by clicking this edit button. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Finally, if you actually want to look at one of these reports, you would click this little arrow to the right here, and that would actually let you view the report so you can see what the report looks like. So that's a basic overview of the financial reports screen. If you're going to create a new report, you click Add Report. But I also want to talk about this icon we see over here at the right called Manage Report Tags. So we should talk about report tags, because what report tags are going to do for us is it's going to let us select a specific set of accounts for a report. So if we want to set up a report tag, we're going to click Manage Report Tags, and we're going to create what's called a tag group. So think of it like with a tag group, we can basically think about this. A lot of times how I see churches use this is, let's say you have like different boards of the group. Like let's say we have a board of youth ministry. So I'm going to go ahead and name this group youth, let's say board of youth ministry. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and name our tag group, and then we will need to choose what types of accounts can be part of this tag group. In this case, I'm interested in putting in income and expense accounts into the Board of Youth Ministry. So I'm going to save this now. And this takes me into this tag group. And now what I can do is I can add tags to this tag group. So I'm going to click the Add Tag button. And I'm going to put in the first tag I want to do. This is basically the first grouping of accounts within this tag group. Because when I run a report, I can have the option of saying, well, I want to use a tag group Board of Youth Ministry. And this is going to, the tags within this tag group are going to decide how the accounts are arranged on your report. So let's start off with Youth Ministry Income. And we're going to select our income accounts. And if you have any additional descriptions or notes about this tag, you can fill that in here. In this case, I'm just going to save it. Let's say I also will want a youth ministry expense. And again, I'm going to select expense. I can put more notes in if I wanted to, but I'm going to save it. Now, the next thing I'm going to do if I want to add accounts to this Board of Youth Ministry is I click the gear icon here, and over at the right I get any of my income accounts, and I can select any of my income accounts that I want to be a part of this tag. Now you'll notice if I hover over a parent account, it's going to have all of its child accounts also selected when I do that. So if I hover over offerings, you can see everything under offerings would be a part of the tag I'm selecting. Otherwise, I would click on individual accounts. Now, in this case, for the youth ministry income, I want to include just a few particular accounts. So I'm going to select the youth fund, and I'm also going to select what I have here. Sorry, I'm just consulting my notes on this. And also, I have an account here called Youth Missions. So if I go here, I definitely created this account yesterday. Where did that go on me? Well, I don't know where that went. I definitely created that yesterday. I don't know what happened. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to we'll say young adults ministry. How about that? Well, no, sorry. We'll use children's ministry. How about that? We'll go with that. We're going to put those in there and click update. It has added those particular accounts. And I'm going to do the same with expense here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in for youth expense. I have an account here called youth events. And I have another account here called Youth Missions that I want to be a part of this tag. So I click Update, and there those are. So I've created my tags, and I've decided what accounts should be part of those tags. Now, that still may not totally click with you yet until we actually use these in a report. And when we get to our custom reports, I'm going to show you how to use the tags within a custom report. But for right now, let's go back to the financial report screen. And I do want to take a look at a couple of our pre-built reports. So let's start off with our balance sheet. I'm going to click on this arrow to the right. And this is our pre-built balance sheet report. Now, on this report, what you're going to see is these columns. You're going to see this year's starting balance. And when it says this year, it's referencing what we have up here in this drop list. In this case, we have it set to the current fiscal year. So when you run this report, it's referencing your current fiscal year. But if you wanted to look at a previous fiscal year, you could go in here and say, well, show me this from January 2024 to December of 2024. And when I do that, that's going to go back and that's going to reference your previous fiscal year. So you can go in and you can adjust what year you're looking at within this report just by clicking this drop down here and selecting your fiscal year. So again, we have this year's starting balance, this year's ending balance, this year's debits, this year's credits, how the account has changed over time. So you can see if we compare the starting balance to the ending balance, this account has gone up by about $35,000. And then the percentage change, and this is saying basically the account has increased by 112%. Now, there's also, I should also mention over here, you can select the particular fiscal year. You can also select which period you're looking at, whether that be a month or a quarter. Although on this report, that really won't have much effect because the columns are looking at entire years. They're not looking at specific months. So really really in this case, this won't do a lot for you, but there will be other reports where you might want to adjust which month you're looking at or which quarter you're looking at, and that's going to do that for you here. So if we look here, we can go down through and down to the very bottom. We also have a summary section. So this report is going to show all of your assets, all of your liabilities, and at the very bottom, it's going to take your total assets. So this year's starting balance, this year's ending balance, debits, credits, change, percent. It's going to take all these totals then, and it's going to take your total assets, subtract your total liabilities, and this is going to be what you have here net at the very bottom. So you get a summary here at the bottom. Now, of course, you can print this report out, and this is what it would look like printed out in the preview. Or, of course, this could be exported out to Excel, and this is going to give you an Excel spreadsheet version of this very same report. Okay, so you can see what that looks like there. Okay, so you get all that. So that is the balance sheet. Moving on next, let's take a look at our chart of accounts report. Now, this is very similar to the balance sheet report. It's really not that much different. You can see it actually uses all the same columns. But the difference here is that when you are looking at the chart of accounts report, the balance sheet report was only looking at the assets and liabilities. But the chart of accounts report is going to be looking at all your account types. So across the board, every single account you're going to see on this report. Now, as a result, it does not have a summary at the bottom. It's not adding, subtracting anything at the bottom because it's looking at everything. We don't really know what we want to add and subtract from each other on this default version of the report. But again, just like you could with the balance sheet report, you could adjust which fiscal year that you're looking at. Again, on this report, the month or the period doesn't really have a lot of effect on this because it's not looking. The columns aren't looking at any periods. They're just looking at whole years. So this is not going to really have much of an effect here. But again, you'd be able to print that out. Okay. And see, so you can see that there. Any printing options you might have there, you can see. You can make adjustments to. And this is all in your web browser here, of course. And you could also export that out to Excel, and here's what that would look like in Excel. Okay, so we have that there, and that would be your chart of accounts report. All right. Moving on next, we have the chart of accounts. Let's talk about the check register report. So this is going to look a little bit different from our two reports we've looked at so far. If we look at the check register, this is what we call a ledger style report, where it's not looking at account balances, but instead it's looking at transactions over a time period to specific accounts. So this one here, it's looking at all of our check transactions on our asset account. So in this case, it's pretty much just showing us our Central Trust checking account because that's the only account I'm writing checks out of, but it's showing us all the checks within the time period we have set up here at the top right-hand corner. So I'm looking at all of 2025. Let's say I wanted to get a check register for just the month of April then. So I could choose April 1st, April 30th. And what that's going to do for me here is this is going to show me all checks for the month of April. It starts with the oldest checks on top and works its way on down through. So you're going to see the date of each check, it has type because you might have another ledger style report that looks at other types of transactions at the same time, but you'd see the check number here. You'd see the payee, the line item description, and for all your checks, the description is going to be just the total line, the balance, and then what you're going to see here is the amount of each check. You also see it says balance before January 1, 2025. So this is saying where you started at, and this is going to say where you ended at. Now, this might be a little potentially confusing because if you're just looking at your check register, this is only considering your checks in here. It's not considering any deposits during the month. It's not considering any, anything else that would otherwise change the balance. So this may not be a true figure at the very end. This is probably best used again for just seeing all the individual checks here in the system, but you do get a running balance here in this column. Okay. Again, you'd be able to print this out, and then you're going to see what the printout would look like there. You would also be able to export this to a CSV file, and you can see that there. All right, so we have that. We have our check register. Next on the list is another ledger style report, but this one is going to be our general ledger report. So let's take a look at our general ledger. So if I go back to our financial reports, let's go ahead and go to general ledger, and I'm going to click the little right arrow here. And the general ledger is also a ledger style report. You'll notice it's taking a little bit longer to load because we're not just looking at a single account here, but instead we are looking at all of our accounts. We are looking at ledgers for every single one of our accounts during this time period. So top to bottom, every transaction over the time period that we have set up here. So let's maybe rein this in just a bit, and let's maybe look at just January, make this a little bit less unruly possibly. So we're going to see all the transactions during that time. So this is where that type column really comes more into play because you're going to see every transaction type for all accounts then. And this is where, again, that running balance is going to be probably a little more of a more valid option here, because this is including all transaction types. You can see here on the Central Trust checking account, here's what the balance was at the start of the year, and then every single transaction for the month of January. You can see what your ending balance will be. And it also sums up your total amount of transactions for this time period as well. So every single transaction across the board, you're going to see here for every account. If you click the print option again, that's going to let you print out your report. And of course, you could export that out to Excel, and this is what that will look like in Excel. So you can see all that there. So we have some kind of breaks in there to help you separate out your accounts then. All right. So let's go ahead and back out of here, and that's our general ledger report. And the last of our default reports I want to show you before we get into custom reports and customizing these reports is our statement of income and expense. So with our statement of income and expense, let's go back and we click on the arrow to the right for statement of income and expense. This is the basic statement of income and expense that we show here. So this is, of course, only looking at our income and expense accounts. It's showing us all of our income and expense accounts. So we're seeing them all here. We're seeing what the year's the budget is for the current year for each of these accounts. So what we're expecting to bring in or expecting to spend. This year's actual, what we've actually spent and what we've actually brought in. We see the percentage of budget that we have used, and we have the amount remaining between our budget and our actuals. And again, you can do current fiscal year, you can select a particular year you want, you can select a particular period you want. Again, this version of the report right now is looking at whole years. So you can go ahead and kind of change which months you're looking at. But again, that's going to be dependent on how we've set up our columns here. We can print this out. This is what the printout will look like. And we can export this out to Excel. All right, we have that there. Okay, so let's go back to our financial reports screen next. And let's go ahead here, and I want to take a look at our custom report abilities here. So one of the big changes between the previous version of Ledger and the new version of Ledger is that we have greatly expanded our custom report abilities. A lot of people really had trouble in the old version of Ledger because we only had default reports where you could change a few things about them, but a lot of the times you had to go out to Excel to really get what you wanted. We've changed that in the new version of Ledger. In the new version of Ledger, you can build the report you want, or you can even make your own spin on existing reports to get what you want. So I want to start off by looking at that statement of income and expense report, and let's modify that a little bit to maybe fit your needs a little bit better. So if we click on the pencil icon here, this is going to let us edit this existing report, and this takes us into our custom report builder. So right now, we are editing our statement of income and expense report. You can see the name of the report up here. I should also mention you can decide if you want to share your report with other users of Church360 Ledger. If you have this box checked, anybody who logs into Church360 Ledger and goes into the financial reports section will be able to see and view the report you are sharing. Now, bear in mind if their account has restrictions where they can't see particular accounts or things like that, they would still be able to open the report, but there'll be rows missing from the report if they don't have access to see those particular accounts. So just bear that in mind. But then if we go down here, right now we're looking at what we call an account section of, an accounts section, yes, sorry about that, accounts section of our report. An accounts section is going to look at balances of accounts over a time period. period. Also, we can set our default fiscal year that we're looking at and period that we're looking at for this report. These act as sort of a reference point for your columns when we start talking about working with reports. So you can also name particular sections of your report. So if you want to, you can actually have multiple sections of a report, and you can have like an accounts section, and then you could have a ledger section below that if you wanted to as well. And so you can actually name these sections to decide, if you want kind of a header for each section of your report. Now going down here, we're looking at our statement of income and expense as it's kind of as the default here in the system. We can decide over here at the left what types of accounts we want to see here on this report. Right now, we're looking at our income accounts, our expense accounts, and any equity-backed funds we're also seeing. We can also decide the chart depth, and I'm going to go into more of that here in another custom report we're going to build from scratch here momentarily. But then you're going to see all of your different accounts that you have here that fall into the income, expense, or equity-backed funds categories. Now, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and drop off funds. I want to just look at income and expense in this custom version of the report that we're going to be doing here. And so right now, we're looking at a statement of income and expense that is looking at the entire year. But my guess is for a lot of churches, you're probably running a monthly statement of income and expense, and you might want to see information that is maybe year to month, where it's basically year till the end of, let's say, we're going to go ahead and set this up for April. I want to see this year to April, let's say. Okay, well, here's what we'll do for that. So what I can do here is I'm seeing my current columns. If I want to add a new column over here at the right, we see a variety of different options that we could add in. So let's go ahead and let's set up a year to month column for our budgets here. So I'm going to click the budgets option here. And when I click the budget option, it's going to ask me, well, what data should be shown on this budget column? Do I want to see the budget for just May of 2025? And it's selecting May because the period right now is set to the current month. So do I want to see just to May of 2025? Do I want to see so many months before May of 2025? In this case, this is probably the option I'm actually going to pick, because let's say I'm running this in May. Well, I want to see what the year to month was 1 month before May 2025, or in other words, April. And this, if I set it up this way, if I run this report at the start of each new month, I can get the previous month's budget without having to go do too much work with it earlier. And actually, hold on, that's actually probably not the option I want to use. Probably what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead here and edit this. Let's set this to April. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do year to April. I'm going to set this for this option here, year to April. And this goes from the start of the year till the end of, in this case, April. If I do year to date, that's going to disregard this period. And it's going to say, well, I'm going to go from January 1 of 2025 all the way up to today's date, which is May 15th. I want year to April. If I do this year, this would be for the entire year. And that's what we have in this year's budget column. That's the entire year. I could do year to April. I could also say the budget as of so many years ago. If you look at this column date range, this is going to tell you what the option you picked is going to give you here with this. So I want year to April, and this is matching up with what I want to see. Now the system will name your columns for you. So in this case, the column name is going to be year to April budget. But if I wanted to give this a custom name, I could uncheck this, and then I could name this column myself if I wanted to. I'm going to leave this set as year to April though. So I'm going to go ahead and press the add button now. And this has placed my year to April budget column here at the end of the report. But maybe that's not really where I want to see this. This is something I want to see really more towards the front of the report. So you might notice on these columns here, there are arrows pointing to the left and right. You can rearrange your columns when you're editing the report. So if I click the arrows to the left here, I can just move this over. And let's say this is actually the first column that I want to see. I can move this all the way to the front of my report. So now I have year to April budget, and then I have this year's budget. So basically year to the end of the previous month, and then the whole year. Well, I probably also want my actuals in here too. So if I press actuals, I'm going to set up a very similar thing for the actuals. I'm going to do year to April, press add, and then I'm going to go ahead and slot in my year to April actuals right next to my this year's actuals. And you can see that there. So this is a good way now. This is showing us, well, here's our year to April, and here's the whole year. Here's the year to April, here's the whole year. And then the percentage of the budget, if I wanted to change how this is being calculated, if I want to look at, the percentage of budget for, just April, I can click on this column here and I can decide how I want this to calculate. So right now this is calculating this percentage is by looking at this year's actual and dividing it by this year's budget. That tells us how we're doing. But if I want to do that for year to April, what I could do is I can click on these two and I could say, well, actually what I want is I want year to April actual divided by the budget, and I click update, and now the percentage of the budget is based on these columns instead of these columns. So you get to decide everything about this report. I could do the same thing with the remaining here. I could go ahead and take out this year's budget, this year's actuals. Let's do year to April budget, year to April actual, click update, and you can see how we're doing there. So this lets you set up exactly how you want this report set up. Now, when I'm done, you'll notice the update report is grayed out. I can't update a default report in the system. It doesn't let me do that. But what I could do is I could say save as copy. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this entire report up here at the top, and let's do year to previous. We'll call this one year to previous month. And if I click save as copy, now I have a new version of the statement of income and expense that has year to previous month. And if I view that report, now I see, well, here's the report that I created based on my statement of income and expense. And then what I could do is, let's say when I get to the end of May, well, and I start in June, I can just change this from April to May. Well, here's my May report now. So you can set up your own custom reports and then quickly shift the time periods just when you're viewing the reports. Now, one thing I do want to mention, if you create a report, another user cannot go in and edit that report. So with that in mind, they can still view the report, but if they have any reports that they want, they should create the report. They should create the report themselves, so that way they have editing capabilities on that report. So just want to kind of bear that in mind. All right, I want to go ahead and run through a few other kind of custom reports here. Let's build a new report from scratch here. So I'm going to put the Add New Report button here up at the top, and this starts off with a whole new, whole blank slate to work from. Let's go back to those tags I had talked about earlier. Let's go ahead and we're going to create what's called our Youth Ministry Report. Okay. And I do want to share this with other users, so I'm going to check off this box here. And then I want to add a section to this report, so I'm going to go ahead and let's add an account section. And now I need to decide what I want to show in this report. So before I go down to the account types and do all that, I'm going to click on where it says tags here, and I want to say I want to use a tag group. Let me refresh my page. I thought we could create that. Where's that? We had just created that tag group. There it is. Just need to refresh my page. And we're going to select Board of Youth Ministry. So when I do that, you'll notice now it goes back to those tags I had created earlier, and you can see it selected just those accounts, and it's grouped them by the tags I had within the tag group here. So now what I can do is I can build a report, but it just looks at these particular accounts within my income and expense. So let's build a report. Let's do, we're going to do let's go ahead and do a year to May budget. Let's go ahead and do a year to May actual. And let's go ahead then and also do our difference here. So we're going to take our budget less our actual. Okay. And there we go. A very simple report. Maybe your youth ministry board says, hey, we need to see how we're doing on our budget here for these particular accounts. Well, that's no problem. You can build a report using the tags you had created earlier to get a custom report that you could provide to your board of youth ministry that would only be for their accounts. You can isolate just their accounts instead of you having to kind of say, well, here's everything, but just cherry pick out your stuff. You don't have to do that. You can set this up so they can kind of keep track of just their items. So we're going to call this, again, board, we're going to call this youth ministry report. And save it. And there it is. There's our youth ministry report. Okay, the next type of report I want to look at, I'm going to call this our equity-backed funds balance report. So let's add in a new report here. I'm just going to call this EBF balance. Okay, and again, I want to share this with other users. And I'm going to click Add Section down here at the bottom, and we're going to add an accounts section. Okay. And on this report, I just want to show my equity-backed funds. So I'm just going to select funds, but I really want to show the funds at just a high level. I don't want to drill down and show like, well, here's the income under this, here's the expense under this. We're going to go ahead and actually back up our chart depth. And when we do that, you can see instead of showing like, oh, there's this category of grants and memorials, well, we're just seeing here is all of our equity-backed funds. So let me show you how I would set up this report. Again, I want to run this for our current fiscal year, our current month. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this off with a starting balance. So we're going to say this year's starting balance. What did we start the year with in these different funds? And you can see that'll populate in. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in credit and debit columns. Now we don't necessarily have something that says, additions to this account, subtractions to this account, but we can use credits and debits to get that. So I'm actually, in this case, since a credit actually increases a equity-backed fund, I'm going to select credit here, and I'm going to go ahead with this. And we are going to say this year on that. But what I'm going to do to make this more clear to the reader of this report is I'm going to uncheck this leave name dynamic so I can actually name this column here. And I'm going to name this receipts. Okay, so receipts. Okay, so this is what we have, this is what we have earned in these different equity-backed funds. Then I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to go with debits, and I'm going to say this year. I'm going to uncheck the column name, and I'm going to call this column disbursements. Okay, this is what we've spent in these various equity-backed funds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in ending balance. I'm going to say this year. And this is going to show us what the ending balance is. So we get a little bit of kind of here's where we started, here's what we brought in, here's what we spent, and finally here's where we ended at. And you could, even if you wanted to, like add in a difference column to show, okay, how did we change over the course of the year? So you could do a difference where you say, I'm going to say take the ending balance, subtract the starting balance. And this is kind of how we changed over the course of the year then. So again, once I like where this is at, I save the report. You can see I have my EBF balance report. I click on this, and there we go. We can quickly get a balance of all our equity-backed funds then. Okay, let's look. I got two more custom reports I want to show, and then we'll move on to talk about the bank reconciliation process. The next type of account report I want to show, I'm going to call this my net assets report. So we're going to do net assets. Now again, our goal in this one here is I want to look at all of our assets, but I want to subtract out our to see kind of if we took out all of our restricted money, what do we have quote unquote free in the system? So I'm going to go ahead and add a section here. I'm going to add accounts, and we want our assets, equity, income, expense, but I don't want my funds. I'm going to dial this back to chart depth 1 here on this. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and put in, again, we're going to start off with our starting balance for the year. We're going to go ahead and put in our ending balance for the year. And let's go ahead. I think that should be really all we need. Reports don't necessarily have to be complex. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize the summary section here. So if I click on where it says summary, I can put a summary at the bottom of my report, and I can decide, okay, I want to start off by adding in my assets, but then subtracting out my funds. So this will then tell us this figure down here at the bottom is our net assets. This is saying I'm taking all of my assets put together, subtracting out all my funds, and this is what I have left over when I consider my net assets here in the system. So again, a great report just to see some kind of key information for your church. I'm going to save that, share it with others, and again, now I have this net assets report. All right, one final customer report, and I know I've been leaning heavily on the account section here, but let's go ahead and add a new report. And let's go ahead and make a deposit register. Okay. So we showed a check. We already have a check register in the system here already. Maybe you want to see a deposit register too. So if I go ahead and do add section here, I'm going to share this accounts. Let's go ahead and let's look again. Oh, sorry, not accounts. I apologize. Let me back up a step. We're not trying to do accounts. We're trying to do a ledger. So we're going to do ledger, and for on ledger here, what we're going to do is we're going to say edit selected. We want to choose which accounts that we want to consider. So let's go ahead and pick our savings account, our checking account. Let's do our farmers savings, farmers money market, and farmers bank checking here. We're going to select those accounts. Those are the ones I'm concerned with. I click update. Those are the accounts that are going to be on here. I can set the date range that I'd like to look at by default. Of course, when you view the report, you can change this. Let's just do the whole year on this. So from January 1 all the way down to December 31. And then in filtering here, I can choose what types of transactions that I want to see. So in this case, I'm really only concerned with deposits here. So I could just do deposits. And then when I look at this, we see, again, starting at the earliest transactions in our central trust checking account, it shows us here's what our balance was as of the start of the year. And then it shows us every single transaction as I go on down the line. Okay. It looks like I really only had deposits to my checking account in this case, unfortunately. But you're going to see all those different accounts then. Now, there is one more thing I want to touch on here in our custom report builder. There's a third type of section here called text. Oftentimes we would hear from people who said, I'm presenting these reports to my church board, but they're just not as well versed in financial accounting as maybe the reports are kind of requiring them to be. It would be nice if I could have some kind of like explanation section that it kind of explains, hey, here's what this report is doing, or hey, this line may look kind of strange, but here's why. And so what you could do is with this text section, you can literally have just a text box at the bottom of the report that explains. So maybe put in like a disclaimer. This only shows money coming into the asset accounts. It does not reflect any money spent, and therefore the final balance is not accurate to the true balance of the account. And so I can have that at the bottom of my report here. I'll save that. And so if I look at my deposit register now, yes, you do get your deposit register, but here at the very bottom, we have this disclaimer section that I had written in that would go along with the report. Okay, so that is a look at some of the things you can do with the custom report builder in Church360 Ledger. It is an extremely powerful tool. You can build a lot of reports that maybe before in the previous version of Ledger, you were exporting out to Excel and moving columns around and putting in additional Excel formulas and things to get the calculations you really wanted. We hope we've made this a lot easier for you, because once you create these reports, a lot of times all you need to do to get the report for the next month is just to make a few adjustments to your dates and you're done. So I hope that helped explain that. All right. I want to go ahead now and move on to our next section, which is to talk about the bank reconciliation process. So the bank account reconciliation process, and really I should say the reconciliation process, because you could also do this with credit card if you have credit cards, if you have a liability set up. But let's go ahead and go to our chart of accounts. And when I go to my chart of accounts, let's go to Central Trust Checking, and I'm going to view the register for that account. And in this case, this is an account that I've said I want to be able to do reconciliations on. So this reconciliation tab is available. So if I click on reconciliation, this brings me to the window where I can start my reconciliation. So if I press reconciliation, this is where the reconciliation window is going to come up. Now, of course, when you're doing your bank statement reconciliation, you are going to need the bank statement for the month that you want to reconcile. If you don't have that, you're really not going to get very far. So you will need that bank statement. I also recommend having like a pencil. That's just my process, though. Now, the first thing I like to do is I like to set my date range of transactions that I'm looking at. Now, strictly speaking, you're not required to do this. I think it makes things easier personally, but again, it's up to you. What I like to do is I like to take a look at my bank statement, and I like to look at the lowest check number, because checks are typically the last thing to clear the bank. So when I'm setting up my date range for this reconciliation, basically deciding what transactions I want to consider for my reconciliation, I need to go ahead and set a date range and say, this is what I want to look at. And since checks are usually the last thing to clear, even though let's say I'm reconciling the month of April, I probably have some checks from the end of March that didn't clear until we got into April. So the bank isn't going to show those till April. So what I like to do is look for that lowest check number and then find that in Ledger and then set the date of that check as the beginning of my date range for my reconciliation. So in this case, I'm going to be doing a reconciliation of the month of March. So I'm going to start then on March 28th, and then I'm going to have that run through end of April. And I'm going to confirm that. So now I should only be seeing transactions that fall between March 28th and April 30th of 2025. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my statement date. This is the last day that you have a transaction for on your bank statement. In this case, I'm going to say April 30th. Okay. Next, what I need to do is I need to put in the starting balance and the ending balance according to my bank statement. So I'm going to put in my starting balance here, and the value I have here is $572,481.13. For my ending balance, then, I have a value of $585,958.20. Okay, so now that I've put that in, down in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see an off-by figure. This is the difference between your starting balance and your ending balance. Through the reconciliation process, as we select transactions that are cleared, we should be making up the difference between our starting balance and our ending balance. So let's see that in action. Well, if I go through here and I go to the very bottom, this is going to have our oldest transactions here on the list. So let's go through, let's pretend I have a bank statement here. And yeah, I found a couple of checks that didn't clear until we got into April. Let's go ahead and handle those. So I'm going to check off these transactions. And you're going to notice as I check these off, this off by number is changing as I go through. It's either increasing or decreasing depending what I'm selecting. If you look at the very top of this window, you'll also see selected withdrawals and selected deposits. This is going to give you withdrawal and deposit total as you're selecting transactions. All right, back to our reconciliation. So I'm going to select the transactions that are on my fictional statement here. We had a few checks here from the end of March. Looks like payroll had gone through, so I don't need to worry about payroll for the end of the month here. That had gone through, but I do have a few other things, checks that I wrote that didn't go through. So I'm making sure to not go ahead and select any of those payroll transactions because those either didn't come through yet, or really if they had already cleared and I ran a reconciliation from the previous month, those wouldn't even show up. Transactions that have already been cleared will not show up on another reconciliation. But then I'm going to go through here, and now I'm into April, and really looking through in April, I'm going to say that really all of these transactions have cleared. Now, that isn't always true. I'm going to say if you've checked off every single item in your reconciliation, more than likely we probably didn't get our reconciliation done quite right, because almost inevitably at the end of every month, you are going to end up having transactions that didn't clear the bank by the end of the month and will probably be picked up in the next month. So I'm just going through here, and in this case, in this fictional reconciliation I set up, I did in fact have most of my transactions cleared. So I'm going to do that, and this is now here set to, hey look, my off by is at 0. I can post this reconciliation now. Once my off by gets to 0, the system will let me post the reconciliation. And by posting the reconciliation, this is saying we are, basically by going through the transactions I've selected, Ledger and the bank agree on the transactions that have cleared the bank. This doesn't necessarily mean that your bank overall and your ledger overall are in balance. That would only be true if you've reconciled all your months, and of course, you might have outstanding transactions from the previous month. So this is a bank statement reconciliation. It's intended to reconcile to your statement. Now, again, if your statements are all correct, really the only difference should be your outstanding transactions. But again, that goes down to kind of a deeper rabbit hole. But let's pretend for a moment here that I went through here, I did my reconciliation, and off by wasn't at 0 yet. It happens, you're doing your reconciliation, things don't quite line up. Well, then you got to kind of look back through your bank statements. Well, did I miss anything? As I'm going through my statement and I'm checking off the transactions that I'm checking them off here on screen, did I miss anything? Did I have something entered in a wrong amount and I just checked it off anyway? Are there transactions that are outside of my date range here? There's a lot of things you might have going on. But if you need to say, I want to pause my work on this and come back to it later, you don't just close this window out. You can't post it, because in the situation I'm talking about, that post button wouldn't be up for you to post it, but instead you're going to click this Save for Later button. So if I click Save for Later, what that's going to do for me here, well, maybe, what this Save for Later button is going to do for me is it is going to go ahead and save my work on this reconciliation. Again, I don't know why it's giving me trouble here today. But what it should be doing is it should be taking me back to the reconciliation screen. And instead of saying, oh, there we go, it just took a moment to save. It's going to take me back to the reconciliation screen. And when I refresh my page, instead of saying add a reconciliation, now it says continue reconciliation. And when I click on this, this picks up right where I left off. All my information is still entered. All the transactions I've checked off are still checked off. I may need to readjust my date range to get that back to where it was. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly do that again. Let's go ahead and set that for the March 28th through April 30th. Confirm. Okay. It has saved exactly what I have done. So the only difference is if you've made different. The only difference is if you've made changes to transactions. If you've added in new transactions, those changes will be there. Those new transactions will be there for you to clear off. Then once you are in balance, your off by is at zero. If you click the post button here, this is going to go ahead and this is going to post your reconciliation. When you post a reconciliation, every transaction that you have checked off is going to get the reconciled status in Church360 Ledger. When a transaction is reconciled, that's kind of your final stamp of approval on a transaction. This is saying we are confident in this transaction. This is how it went to the bank. This is what we have. And as a result, you can no longer make any changes to a reconciled transaction. You cannot void a reconciled transaction. So, okay. Well, not sure what's going on there. Let me back out here for just a second. I do apologize for this here. Oh, I think I just clicked too many times. Once you post a reconciliation, it is going to go ahead here and we go into reconciliation. It is going to show you the reconciliation that you posted. So it's going to show you the statement date, when that reconciliation is done, how many transactions are in that reconciliation. If I click this arrow to the right here, this is going to open up the reconciliation report. The reconciliation report is going to show you your statement date, when it was reconciled on, what you entered as the starting balance, what you entered as the ending balance, and here is a list of all the transactions that you have reconciled here. You'll be able to click the print button to print this report out. You can export it out to Excel to get an Excel spreadsheet. But this will serve as sort of a report that will let you view everything you did in that reconciliation. So that is how the reconciliation process works and the corresponding reconciliation report. Now, one final thing to show before we get into our quiz today, and that is the event log, and I promise this will be quick. The event log is just a log of what happened when here within Church360 Ledger. So if I click in the settings button here, I go down to the event log. The event log here is going to show us here is every single action that happened inside of Church360 Ledger. Now, this event log is also shared with the people and events module of Church360 members. But if you just want to see Ledger actions here, come to where it says all modules and switch this to Ledger. This is going to filter your view so you are only seeing transactions. Actually, you're only seeing items here for Ledger. Now, in the event log, you're going to see the day and time something occurred on, what user was signed in at the time of that action, who made that action essentially, a record describing what action has taken place. So you see on the reconciliation, it shows every single line item that was reconciled. And you can click on any of these line items, or any of these transactions, to jump over to that transaction and take a look at it. And then finally, it also is going to show you a description of what happened. You can search for particular items. So if you type in like an account name, for example, or an amount, let's put in $4, or just put in 4 here. If I search for that, that's not a great example. How about I type in reconciliation? Okay, well, you can see there. This is when I turned on that reconciliation status for this particular account. So it would find that. You can also jump to particular days that things happened on. So I'm seeing all these actions for May 15th. There's a lot of things going on here. But if I wanted to look at yesterday's event log, I select that and click go, and this jumps me back to yesterday. And here's what all happened, yesterday in the system. And it can show you so much at once, but if I click load older, here it's going to show me older actions that have taken place then. So it's going to let you have all that there. And again, this can be printed, this can be exported, and that is our event log. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our discussion today. Let's jump into our quiz. So again, I have a couple questions here for you guys. Again, no worries, you are not being graded on this quiz. This is more just to see, hey, did what I say stick with you today? You are going to see the question appear on screen like so, and then you'll have an opportunity to answer that question in a window that appears. So starting off here with this first question, true or false, the general ledger view has an option to show voided transactions. So thinking back to that general ledger view I talked about way back at the start of today's training, were you able to, is there a way to view voided transactions within that view? So I'm going to give everyone a few moments here to send in your reply to that question. See, people are voting here. I'm going to give you just another moment or two to respond. Okay, looks like we've received responses from most everyone here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. It looks like the majority of us said true on that one, and that's correct. That is true. The general ledger view has an option to show voided transaction, while the general ledger report excludes voided transaction due to customer demand. I didn't mention that when we were talking about the general ledger report, but we actually do not show on the general ledger report that we had looked at any voided transactions, but we are going to see voided transactions on that general ledger view. Okay, so next up, true or false? The default statement of income and expense report can be modified to include year-to-date totals. So thinking back to the statement of income and expense and customized reports, thinking about that, can we customize that statement of income and expense to include year-to-date totals? Is that true or false? Okay, looks like we've got answers from a lot of people here. I'm going to give that just a second or two more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll here. And again, it looks like the majority of us said true on that, and you're right on. It is true. Users who have the right to manage reports can edit and save a copy of any default report. So thinking back to that statement of income and expense, it's a default report, but you could go in and edit it and make your own copy of it with its own customizations. All right, continuing on. True or false? Reports can only be accessed by the user who created the report. True or false? Reports can only be accessed by the user who created the report. Is that true or false? So when you create a report, it's only you who has access to it, or can that report be shared with other users? All right. I'm going to close that out. Again, majority of us here said false. And that is false. Reports can be shared with other users. When you're creating or editing a report, if you check the box labeled "This report can be seen by others," the report will be available for other users to see on their login. Now, other users can't edit a report that you have created. So they can't go in and make changes to the report that you made, but they can view the report. So when you view the report, you can, of course, change the time periods that you're looking at, but you can't go in and make structural changes like adding or moving columns or things like that. Okay, next up. When working on a bank account reconciliation, you find out a transaction is missing. What should you do before you add the transaction? Before you go out of the reconciliation and you decide, hey, I need to add that reconciliation in, what should you do? Three options here. Close the web browser, click Save for Later, click Post. What should we do? Oh, wow. You guys got that one answered quick. All right, let's end the poll. You guys were unanimous, and you have this one right on. Click Save for Later. Absolutely. Save your work, come back to it later. Reconciliations can be a lot. I remember growing up, my mom balancing her checkbook. That was a part that the month that she always just was not a huge fan of. So it's something similar to bank account reconciliation. Sometimes you just need to get up and take a break. Save for later is going to let you do that. All right, last question, and this one's simple. To true or false, to print a past reconciliation, go to the event log and click print. To print a past reconciliation, go to the event log and click print. Is that true or false? Okay. Let's see, people are responding here. All right, we got a split decision on this one. Half of you said true, half of you said false. So who's correct? Well, that is false. A bank account reconciliation report can only be printed from the reconciliation tab under the account details view. Click the click the arrow icon for the desired reconciliation and click print. So I may have been a little confusing about that. The event log will let you see that a reconciliation has been done, but if you want to get the report for that reconciliation, what you need to do is you need to go into Ledger, go to your chart of accounts, find the account you did the reconciliation for, click to the right, and then go to reconciliation. And then from there, you can see a list of all your completed reconciliations for this account. Click the arrow to the right, and that gets you into the reconciliation report. So that's how you would do that. Okay, well, that wraps up our quiz. So now I'm going to ask, do you have any questions? Again, you kind of can be during the course of today's training. You can be kind of asking questions all along, but if you've kind of been saving them for the end, we can answer those questions here now. I know it looks like Rod has been answering some questions kind of along the way, but let's go ahead and get to any questions he may not have gotten to just yet. So let's take a look here. Starting off here, Joanne. Why does the report say balance before January 1, 2025, even if you choose a later month? Is that ending balance still valid? Okay, I think this was in reference to if we look at one of our ledger style reports, let's say like general ledger here. If I do, so let's say I was going to run this like for the month of March here. Let me go ahead and let me load this in here. And if we go to April 1, oops, probably a bad. So April, sorry, there we go. Okay, so why does it say balance before January 1, 2025? Well, that's a good question. I'm seeing that here. Let me get to on that. Let me just take a look. Yeah, that's definitely the balance before the start of the month, not the balance as of January 1, 2025. I'll ask my team on that one. That one I agree with you, that should not be saying March 31st, balance before April 1, April 1, 2025. I would still say the balance is disregard what it says here on January 1, assume this is actually the start of the current month. But that should be, yeah, I agree. That should be saying, hey, the balance before April 1st. Okay, so sorry about the confusion on that. All right, so that's Joanne's question. Sandy, let's see here. I missed how to find the event log. Please give me the steps as search does not show it. Yeah, absolutely. To get to your event log, you should click the gear icon over on the left side of the screen and then click event log. Now, your login, depending on how it's been set up permission-wise, may not be able to find the event log. It just depends on your permissions. But if you do have permission to get to the event log, it's going to be under the settings gear and then under admin event log. That's where you'll be able to find it. Okay. Let's go back here. Okay, that was about the event log also. What was the most asked question? That I'm not sure here. It looks like most of the questions are pretty unique. I don't think there's really any repeats in that. Sandy, I don't have the settings gear. For that, then I would talk to your administrator of Church360. They will be able to adjust your permissions so you would be able to have that. You would need the ability to change account settings within Church360. So in that case, yeah, we'd have to take a look at that. We'd have to be able to do that. Sandy, I'd say on that, I would say give us a call or we'll reach out to you on that. We just need to take a closer look here. It sounds like that's kind of more of a specific situation, so we'll just need to kind of take a look into that. Okay. Well, again, I want to, if there's no other questions, I do want to thank everybody for attending today's Church360 Ledger webinar. And really the whole series of webinars we've hosted this week. I really hope that they've been helpful to you in learning how to use a new version of Church360 Ledger. If you do have any additional questions, though, that you just thought about after today's training, please go ahead and email us at support@cts.ch.org. You can also give us a call at our 800 number. That's 1-800-346-6120. That's available Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. till 5 p.m. Central Time, and we will be more than happy to help you out that way also. So again, if there's no other questions, that is the end of today's webinar, and I hope you guys have a great day. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.